And again, we really appreciate everybody's patience on this as we work through this process during a pretty unique time dealing with the pandemic. I'm going to pull up our presentation for tonight. Again, at this point, we won't do questions in the middle. We'll do questions at the end. Can we see the PowerPoint, Mr. Mulder?
Yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
All right, again, my name's Joe Wickland. I'm going to cover the very beginning part of this before I turn it over to David Bolf, our city engineer, and John Mulder, our I've got a little bit of feedback that I'm going to check on quick.
You've got a couple of participants that came in late, Joe.
Yep, I'm going to hop in and I got to stop sharing for just a second and make sure we're. Again, I'd ask folks who are at home, especially after I've shared the screen, to mute their devices. That way we don't have to jump in and out. But again, a lot of latitude and a lot of grace tonight as we pull this together. So let me jump in again to our presentation tonight. And we'll start with this slide, which folks who are a part of our first presentation on the Johnson, Carlson, Portland, Alexander, and Hermantown Road project that finished up earlier this fall got used to seeing this slide. Our calendar that we originally rolled out to you in our first public information meeting has obviously got some changes on it. Obviously, we're meeting later. The pandemic has a great deal to do with that process. But most importantly, we've reached a point where David and we're back, right?
Yes.
Yes.
We used to joke when I was at St. Scholastic as a student and as an employee that patience is one of the lesser known Benedictine values that we'll be tapping into tonight. So the ever-changing calendar, but most importantly, we've reached the point where we can, like I said, bring David in and talk about the work that's been done that is less theoretical and started to be in process. Anything that we talk about tonight and any feedback David and John get will end up before the city council during one of the two January meetings, and that's where plans and orders would be approved and advertisements would be sent out for construction bids. Some of this history, my friends like Robin Munch, who've been in meetings with us quite a bit, have seen before, but we always need to start out at the beginning in case someone's joining us for the first time. But the road improvement plan kind of came into being for two reasons. One, multiple community engagement surveys have shown that roads are the #1 issue to residents in our community. The last 2 years we've done these, we've been below 50% of our community saying that the roads are good and excellent. So they're really kind of the #1 issue to residents across our community. And then David will dive into this in a little bit second, but it fit the ability to make the road improvements that we really hope to make community-wide is something that goes far beyond just, the regular taxes paid and the regular budgeting done at the city level. So the long-term financial management plan that was approved by the city council in March of 2019, John will talk a little bit about this, but it really took it, the plans for what we had as a community to a level where we could reconstruct roads so that they would be good and excellent, which led to the citywide inventory of roads.
Where's the volume?
And at this point, I'll turn it over to city engineer David Bolf to talk about how they executed and ranked our roads in the community to determine where we were going to target our efforts first. David?
Okay. Thank you, Joe. Again, my name is David Bolf. I'm the Hermantown City Engineer. So what I'd like to start out tonight with is our road improvement plan. How we got to that point is we needed to inventory all of our roads that we had within the city. And in 2015, we inventoried and ranked each road, and we ranked them 1 to 5, 1 being a new road and 5 being a deteriorated or failing road. And then we looked at how do we treat each of these roads that are ranked? And the ones that are 1 and 2, we wanted to extend the life of the road. There's still a lot of life in them, but we wanted to extend it further. The ones that were 3 needed attention, 2, and then the ones that are 4 and 5 would be qualify for reclaim and overlay or a full reconstruction. And this table on the right side of your screen shows the different sections of road that we have. We have 164 different road sections under our inventory. Some of them are gravel, some of them are rural bituminous, meaning there's no shoulders, or no, excuse me, no curb and gutter. And then the urban sections are the ones that have curb and gutter and some with sidewalk. So with that, Joe, let's head to the next slide, please. So here's a slide on the improvement strategies for the roads ranked 3 through 5. So when we looked at this inventory, the roads that were 1 and 2, we knew we had some maintenance, but they weren't streets that are in dire need of repair. So we focused on the ones that were 3 through 5. And the improvement strategies for those roads in those conditions were usually one of these 3 options. One is a mill and overlay, where they pick up the blacktop, haul it away, and they put new blacktop down. The second being the reclaim and overlay, which they actually grind up part of the road and then we reuse that. And then the third option is the full reconstruction. So the proposal on the Lavaque Junction project is a combination of the reclaim and overlay on the west end, and then full reconstruction on the remainder of the project. Okay, Joe? So I think this one's John's gonna take.
Yeah, and at this point, let's hand it over to, we'll talk a little bit about how we afford and pull off a project of this magnitude in Hermantown. John Mulder, our city administrator, will take over now.
Yeah, so back in 2015, after we had done that road inventory, we started talking about, well, how are we going to deal with the need to fix these roads? And we also looked at just the larger scope is, how do we use and maximize the various sources of revenue that we have to accomplish what the priorities that the city council had. So we looked at all kinds of things in terms of what were some of the aspects that we need to deal with. So we looked at what our existing debt was. We looked at future debt that we knew of. We knew about capital improvement. We said, well, tax base is going to grow, but by how much? We looked at operating expense. When are we going to need to add another police officer? When will we need to add additional help and maintenance in the public works area? And so we looked at those, and we looked at our current financial policies. And the idea there was to help us make better decisions about our budgets so that they were fitting in with our priorities, that we weren't doing something this year and then a year later it had to be undone or didn't make sense anymore. So trying to have something beyond just that annual budget. And it helped maintain our assets. It provides, some clarity and a more defined purpose of where we were trying to get to, as opposed to, again, just that annual budget thing. And one of the things we looked at a lot was that the use of the various funds that we have. We have different sources of revenue, but they're restricted on how we can use those. But we wanted to talk about how can we best use those and how can we best accomplish our priorities. So we did that, and then finally in March of 2019 is the city council adopted that. And that really lays the groundwork for the road improvement plan.
Thanks, John. And John, you can dive in on this, and I know David can speak to this too, but you mentioned the different revenue sources and they have some limitations. Kind of walk us through what you're saying.
Yeah, so as we looked at that, it's like, so how could we possibly fund road improvements? Well, we could do assessments. We could just do general tax levy. We've got municipal state aid, which is specifically designed for roads, but only state aid roads. So not every street is eligible for a state aid road. So in Hermantown, example is Arrowhead and Udsted. Those are city streets that are state aid roads. Part of Hermantown Road is that way. Part of Stebner is that way. So we could use state aid for those kinds of streets. One of the topics we always talk about in Hermantown is the fact that we don't get local government aid. Our neighbor in Duluth gets millions of dollars in aid. We don't receive any. People know that we have a sales tax, but that sales tax is limited by statute and by the legislature to the trunk sewer, some water upgrades that allowed us to build this facility, the City Hall building, and then also the Wellness Center. We have a water and stormwater and sanitary utilities, but those revenues only go to fund those operations and maintenance and upgrades. And same with the streetlight utility fund. We receive money from Minnesota Power, and we use that to maintain our streetlights and our signal system. So we have all those funds, but they're for specific purposes. And then in this process, we can use, okay, maybe we can use the water fund in part of this, and maybe we can use stormwater for part of this. We just try to maximize all of those funds in order to get the best product we can get.
Thanks, John. I'll turn it back over to David Bolf. We'll talk about the city standards in terms of roads before we dive into what they've seen on Lavaque Junction. David?
Hey, yep, thanks, Joe. So this is our Hermantown rural standard. So this throughout the history of the city, we've had standards. Most recently in 2017, we updated our construction standards. Part of that standard is both the rural and urban roadway sections. So what we've proposed to the council is to stick with our rural typical section for a roadway, which includes a 24-foot wide road with 2-foot wide shoulders on either side. So, okay, thank you. This next slide is just kind of a overview of the costs on how we get to the construction costs and what we call soft costs, the engineering and permitting and contingencies. So estimated project cost is $2.1 million. And then the bottom of this shows how we propose to fund the construction of this project. So as John stated earlier, we can use some money from our stormwater utility fund for driveway culverts and ditches, the water utility fund to extend the water main to Lavaque Road. And we have approximately 40 parcels that are accessible at the $9,750 per parcel. And then the general levy takes the bulk of the project cost here. So that's how the 2.1 gets funded.
Perfect. Thanks, David. And I can jump back in here because it's a part that gets asked to me in my role as the community engagement manager and the communication director. But what that assessment total means is that $9,750 assessment can be either paid up front once it becomes finalized, which in this case won't be for almost a calendar year. We just finalized the assessment roll for the project on Johnson, Portland, Carlson, Alexander, and Hermantown roads, and it was at $9,750 for them. It doesn't have to be a one-time payment. Obviously, it can be rolled onto your property taxes at 4% interest over 15 years, and that payment annually then works out to $876.93. There have been different versions of this slide that folks have seen as we were working through the first year, and with Lavaque Junction being obviously a road we knew we were going to do on the front end of this project in the second year. Some of you might have seen 10 years and 5%, but this is where we landed. We were able to get 15 years and 4% through the hard work of Kevin Orm and the folks in our finance department. And again, we're seeing that first round of folks who are some choosing to pay it up front and some having it rolled onto their assessments for 2021 on the roads that we completed in 2020.
So Joe, if I could just talk just briefly about that before we go too far.
Yeah, please.
As you saw in that previous slide, we're going to maximize our use of the stormwater funds that we can apply to that, the water utility fund for that water improvement. You see the assessments, and part of that is because there's benefit to these individual property owners having that new road, but you're not the only ones who use it. Everybody in Hermantown, and even people outside of Hermantown, could potentially use your road. And so that's why, we put, 1.5 million of the general levy. And how we do that is we will borrow the money and have debt service to pay that 1.5 million off over 15 years. And that's kind of why we have the assessment there as well, that at 15 years. That's kind of the debt service schedule that we would use for that. So again, it's a mixture of different funds, the assessment for the benefit that the property owners get with the new road, and then everybody pays to use that road as well through the general levy. Okay, so you can go back.
Thanks, John. We'll hand it back to David Wolf now to get into some of the very specific details from the work that him and the engineers have done on Lavaque Junction and what they're seeing already. David?
All right, thanks, Joe. So again, we've realized that Lavaque Junction was one of the poorest condition roads in the city, and we needed to, during this 30% phase of the project, we've looked into a variety of the underlying conditions out there, which include, there's on the east end, there's some wood corduroy that supports the road through that wetland area. I think we're all aware of there's ledge rock on that, on those two crests, those large hills towards the east end. And most of the pavement is in disrepair, meaning it's beyond its useful life. And from a safety standpoint, the vertical curves, meaning the up and down of the road, do not meet 25-mile-an-hour design standards. So that's one of the big parameters that we've had to deal with in this 30% design piece. So we can go to the next slide, please. There we go. So we've kind of broken this project. I'm showing 4 segments here, but it really can be broken down into 2. Segment 1 is the western about 1,000 feet, and that's what we're stating to be a reclaim and overlay. This section was rebuilt when they put the sanitary sewer down there, so it's in fair condition. It is it has settled over the trench, and if you notice when it rains, there's a long stretch of water that sits in that section. And then the segment 2, 3, and 4 will all slated to be a full depth reconstruction, which means we will be digging down 2 feet, putting in new sand in class 5 and blacktop. And all the sections would be widened to 24 feet of driving width and then 2-foot shoulders. Okay, Joe. So I hope I can explain this well to everybody, but this is what we call a profile of the roadway. And Joe, maybe for if you could point to the top of the hill there, right there is I think what we call Wally's driveway there on the north side, that give a perspective of where we're at. And that dark line is what we are calling the proposed finished grade, and that dashed line is the existing ground. So when we design roadways, we have criteria that we have to design it to. The purpose of this slide is to show that the existing roadway does not meet any kind of design standard. And we entered this with trying to achieve a 30-mile-an-hour speed, and it is not possible with the amount of driveways we have to match into and the topography and the ledge rock. So we backed down our standard to a 25-mile-an-hour. And so this is what we're showing. And where you see 25-mile-an-hour design curve and on the bottom to the left, Joe, we'd actually be raising the road there about 2 feet in that low spot. And then if we go to the right of the page, Joe, where we go down the hill to the wetland, we're planning to raise the road up to 6 feet in that area. So it's going to be a vast improvement for anybody that lives along these curves, as far as being able to see when you exit your driveway. There's not going to be the blind approaches that are there today. So that this is probably the biggest change that you'll notice as part of the project. So I thought it was that's why I wanted to highlight it here tonight. So Joe, we can go to the next slide there. So this slide here is what we call a typical section, which it's basically slicing the roadway. And we have 2 sections here. The upper one, we're showing the roadway as it is today. And basically we have an 11-foot wide lane on each side for a total of about 22 feet with little to no shoulders. And you can kind of see the ditch there off to the left. Then the section below is, I kind of lined it up so you can see the orange line is the edge of the new pavement, which is about a foot wider than it is today on both sides, and then an extra 2 feet of shoulder. So, the road's planned to be 3 feet wider on each side, 1 foot of pavement, 2 foot of shoulder. So the other thing I want to point out on this section, Joe, is on the left side, the ditch bottom. You can kind of see how that ditch moves closer to the homes than it is today. You'll notice this fall we staked the right-of-way. The right-of-way is 33 feet each side of the center line. So there's stakes in everybody's front yard that they're 66 feet apart. So for a good reference, if you're interested in where the ditch will end up under the road construction project, is if you measure 10 feet from those right-of-way markers that are in your front yard, that will be the new ditch bottom. So the ditch is going to get wider and deeper than it is today. So it's moving that ditch, closer to the homes, but also deeper to help convey water, help alleviate ponding in people's front yards. It'll also, with this section, we'll get those driveway culverts lower to reduce the heaving problem that we see out there today. Both the center line and driveway culverts are have heaved because they're not very deep. So I wanted to point that out to everybody as well. Okay, next slide, Joe. So this is what we tried to do here is we took a picture of the roadway. Believe we're looking to the west right here, and a couple of things you'll notice We widened the road to 24 feet. So you'll see that difference, and then added that 2-foot shoulder. So that kind of gives you a sense of how things will look there. In addition, we plan to stripe this roadway with a center double stripe, which means no passing. And then the white line on either side is called a fog line. And those, you know, keep people in their lane. And, you know, it's a 8 at night. The lines are reflective, so you can see them when you're driving at night as well. And then you'll notice on the right side, we superimposed a speed limit sign. Our plan right now, because of the vertical curves at the other end, that this road gets posted to 25 mile an hour to accommodate the design speed of those vertical curves. So we've talked about that with the, you know, the police chief, the county traffic engineer, and staff, and we all feel that's the direction we'd like to go with the speed limit. And we feel this adds you know, a couple of safety measures to this roadway by the striping and the reduced speed limit and the added shoulder for whether it's walking or just you know, snow storage, or being able to navigate around somebody that's biking or walking on the roadway. So we feel it's a good balance on what we've heard at the previous meetings about reducing the speed, but yet allowing, you know, pedestrians and bikers to use this roadway. So there's some thought and effort into the comments that we've heard from the previous meetings. Okay, thank you, Joe. So again, part of this project is from a water utility standpoint. We're planning to extend the water main. It's about 1,300 feet from the bottom of that hill through the top of the hill to Lavaque Road. You know, and the purpose of that is to, you know, increase the pressure and also provide a loop. So if we ever have a break in this area, that water customers can be fed from either end. So I know from the last meeting, there was concern specifically to the 2 residents right at where the water main ends. We know we have ledge rock there. There is a concern about how do we deal with the ledge rock. So I've done some investigation. There is an alternative to blasting rock out of the way, and that alternative is to drill more holes, smaller holes, and then they come in with a backhoe with a hammer, and they hammer the rock out. So it's a longer, slower, louder process, but the hope is there that it's less, there's less likelihood of any negative effects versus blasting. So that's how we are approaching this water main extension right now. Okay, and we go to
That's kind of the grand finale, David. I'm gonna stop sharing the presentation. We can jump back in if there's a particular slide.
Joe, if I could just make a couple comments, if I could.
Yes, please do, John.
So one of the things that we've heard, you know, a couple of things we heard is a lot of talk about the issue of the trail. We also heard a lot of talk about we want to be able to walk on our streets safely. We also heard about we don't want the traffic to get too fast. We also heard concerns about we don't want the road to be super wide. And so we've tried to balance all of those things with the standard of 24 feet, using pavement markings, which we don't have now, that will reduce the lanes a little bit and provide a little bit more paved stuff pavement outside those lines. So that would provide a little better walking space to try to define that walking area. And we're also reducing the speed limit to try to reduce the speed as well, and the amount of traffic, or the traffic that's going on there. We have specifically talked to the police department and said, we're going to need to see some, when this road's completed, we're going to want to see some strict enforcement out there. So we're telling the police department, we want you to be out there. We want you to be looking at that and enforcing that lower speed limit. So we've tried to balance all of those concerns.
We've got a couple of questions before I'll have folks unmute. There's very few people that I ended up having to mute. So I'll do a unmute piece in a second, but there's two questions already in the chat.
Well, I'd like to add a couple of things here too before we
go ahead, David.
So as we're got through this 30% plan set and working towards the next milestone of 60%, what we're doing right now is we are setting the elevation of the new roadway. And it's been a challenge because this road is up and down. There's no uniformity in any sense. And we have driveways on one side that are high and the other side that are low. So if you can imagine, we're trying to thread the needle and give the road the best ride possible, yet connect into these every driveway as best we can. So our goal has been to match driveway grades, meaning from the right of way to the edge of the pavement as they are today. There are a handful of them that are getting steeper, and those individuals I'll reach out to independently and probably meet with you on site, or at least over the phone, let you know what our plan and our thought is. So I've been involved in enough of these projects where, how somebody's front yard and driveway and culvert tie in are a measure of success. So we really are giving this a great amount of effort and, diligence in this phase of this project. So if, anybody has questions about how their driveways or yard are going to tie in, or a drainage issue, feel free to, contact myself or Joe, and we'll get you an answer.
I've got David, anything else from you or John at this point?
No.
Perfect. We've got a couple of, and folks, if you want to dump your questions into the chat, that's fantastic. Again, I'll open it up in just a second, but let's tackle the questions we have in the chat already. First two are kind of tied together, David. Just for clarity's sake, are the outermost markers, the label, the right-of-way markers, are that where the orange flags are now? Or what are those markers that folks want to talk about it in there or check it out in their front yard?
Yeah, so good question. Those stakes are the right-of-way for Lavaque Junction. So if you measure across from one side of the street to the other, it should measure exactly 66 feet. And they are tied with an orange ribbon.
Perfect. And that slide, David, with and again, I'll dive into questions, individual questions and follow-up questions after we knock out these ones in the chat. The slide where you've got the superimposed road, the fog line stripes, the outer white line stripes, is that a pretty close to where the current edge of the roadway is today? I know that when we say it's 22 feet wide now, it's not actually 22 feet wide in every single location, but is that a pretty fair way for folks to think about that slide? And I can call it back up while you're answering it.
So that's a good question, and that the final answer has not been determined. So we show a paved roadway width of 24 feet on that slide that you're looking at there, Joe. Is we actually brought the fog line in 1 foot. So it's paved at 24, but it's actually striped at 22.
So that's pretty close to right where the road is today.
Yes.
Perfect.
So another point that I think needs to be made is the existing roadway does not sit exactly in the middle or parallel to the right of way. So if you can visualize this, if you're at Ugsted Road going east, the road diverges north half a mile, and then it diverges back south as you go to Lavaque Road. So at the worst case, it's about 3 feet. So what does that mean? That means somebody that lives right in the middle of this roadway is going to see the biggest difference in the location of the road. So we're in essence going to move it 3 feet to the south in that location. So I want that to be clear to everybody that we're going to make the road straight. It is not straight today.
And this might be a Paul sensed question, but what is our plan should utility issues be encountered? Would the city foot the bill to repair since we are digging, or the homeowner? Let's take that in 2 parts. When, if there's any issues during the process, when we're putting in the water main, where people have outages and things like that, can we speak to how those are handled? How folks communicate those if there's any issues during construction?
During the construction, that would go to your initial one would be with the foreman of whoever the construction company is, who would then alert the inspector with whatever engineering firm that is, and then up the line to David and or myself.
Perfect. And those names and contacts, as well as mine, are always available especially as we get closer and we know who our subcontractors and contractors are, which aren't determined yet, on the hermantownmn.com /roads website, which is going to have a ton of information once we get into it. And the question is, does the city foot the bill to repair since we're digging, or the homeowner? I'm not sure if that's a specific water question, but Paul, I'll rephrase the question, and David and John, to talk about how driveway culverts work and the work that we're doing, because all of the digging and all of the work that we're doing during the construction phase obviously is on our dime. But if we have driveway culvert issues or utility issues after we are complete, how does that part work?
As
So
far as
a couple of things. One is, as part of this, we're going to replace all of the driveway culverts. Okay, so, and that'll be as part of the project. When you talk about other utilities, is that if there are repairs in the water and sewer that are part of the main, if we were to discover that as we're going through that, we would do those fixes. If it was a repair that needed to be a service line and was seen at, and you noticed it at this point in time or whatever, then that would be the responsibility of the owner.
Do we anticipate interruptions, outages to services such as power or internet during construction for those of us who work from home, and how will it be handled? Same kind of answer Paul gave. Obviously, if there's any kind of confusion or issues during construction, there'll be contact folks right away. I can tell you that during the entire project, and David and Paul, correct me if I'm wrong, but on the Johnson, Portland, Carlson, Alexander projects, we did not have any outages or interruptions for longer than a few minutes, and it was only internet. Am I correct on that?
to the best of my knowledge, yes.
We don't anticipate any power outages. There might be some very short time periods when we got to move a pole, or a pole needs to be moved or something like that. but we do not anticipate power or internet services being disrupted.
Any of those pieces that John alluded to too, not only any service interruptions, but obviously the times when, large equipment or something, the work might be being done right outside your home. We've mentioned this in other meetings, but we'll communicate that when the time comes so that arrangements can be made so that you're parked so that you can still leave. There's a ton of communication we'll do around garbage, around mail services, all those types of things. So although those are unknown today, when we get closer to having those schedules, those will be communicated. Not only on the website, but in a couple different places. David, a couple questions, and you can answer this from the experience we've had this first time around, but trees that are very, very close or maybe just on the inside of the right-of-way at the 33-foot mark. Talk to me about what happens to those and what we've done in the past year to maintain some of those in the places where that's possible.
So we've looked at, trees on multiple projects, and we've worked diligently with homeowners on projects that, we have a tree that's A, on the right-of-way line, or B, on private property or real close to it, the right-of-way line. And one of the things that, we have to be, realistic about trees. And when we do our ditching, we're going down 3 feet. And when we get into a situation where we get into the roots of the trees, it's been our experience that it's best to take those trees out now rather than the inevitable they're going to either die or fall, where we don't want them to fall and when we don't want them to fall. So if we have this year, when we had a couple of trees that were very close to right away, the owners wanted to keep them. We worked with the homeowners and we decided to prune some of the lower branches and save the trees. And I've had a couple discussions with residents already on Lavaque Junction project to that effect. So there's a method for us to do that.
And I can tell you that David did a lot of work last year face-to-face with residents as we got into the construction season, once we were standing in yards, to be able to make sure that we knew what was possible with each tree. So it's kind of a tree by tree answer, and we'll get to that when the time comes. But we'll work with you, but we also want to manage expectations that the inevitable work that we're doing to build this road and this stormwater system can impact the roots of those trees. How far into each driveway will repaving go?
Good question. So right now, like this year's project, every driveway we have slated to go back to the right-of-way line. So that goes back to those stakes with the orange ribbon. That's the plan right now, is to reach back that far on each driveway. And as I said before, there might be 2 or 3 that we need to go back further. And in those instances, I'll be contacting those homeowners individually to share our thoughts and, the limits that we feel is necessary to give them a good product.
As we kind of stay with the driveway paving questions, will there be an option to purchase an extra bit of paving at a better rate than hire someone separately?
Good question. It's that solely falls on the contractor that's awarded the work. On previous projects, in general, they are reluctant to do any work on private property because their equipment is usually not set up for that. Meaning it's bigger and heavier than you would use in driveways. And then also the other issue is, payment. How does that work? And it cannot be part of public process or public project. So if somebody wanted a driveway paved, they'd have to work directly with the contractor and not through the city contract. So it's possible, but it's not likely, is all I'm going to say on that.
We did work with folks who were then going to privately pave their driveways on the project read this year to line up schedules. So that was most convenient for them. So that part can be coordinated with the subcontractors and contractors, but that's different obviously than them doing it.
Right.
And we got feedback that worked really, really slick this past year. Are utility poles being moved?
Great question. Undecided at this point. And I say that because, as I told you, we are moving the ditches, out towards the homes. That means these power poles some of them may be in jeopardy as far as depth of bury, meaning they're not safe. They could fall over. So we have not determined that yet. We need to meet with Minnesota Power and make a determination on that. I would expect that we're going to be replacing or moving some of them, but not all of them. So that will be part of this 30 to 60% effort that we're working on right now.
Perfect. Thanks, David. This might be a favorite question of John Mulder, City Administrator. What happens if the contractor bid goes over budget? Where does that difference come from?
So on this project is that we had that source of, we do water and sewer utility, stormwater utilities, the assessment, and then general levy. So to the extent that we can use water and sewer, we would use that. Otherwise, it's going to come from the general levy. The assessment is not going to change.
Perfect. Back to power poles. What is the minimum height of power and telephone lines, if we know those, and how can these be checked and moved up to meet code?
Another good question. There's different criteria for different types of line, whether it's a transmission line, a distribution line, or a service line. And that is something that the city of Hermantown does not regulate. That's the Public Utilities Commission, and the individual utility commission companies like Minnesota Power, Charter, CenturyLink, MediaCom, they know their standards. And when we meet with them to discuss moving poles, they will address that at that point.
Gotcha. The question came up because we had a resident who could not get their camper in their driveway as it all stands today. And so that's kind of what they're wondering about. Obviously, my guess is they would like to get their camper in their driveway after this project comes to being. Questions?
I'm not sure if I heard, I'm sorry, I'm not sure if I heard the answer to this or if it was asked. Will mailboxes be the city's responsibility to replace or the homeowners?
Perfect. Let's sneak that question in before I open it up to everybody. David, would you talk mailboxes for us and what happens?
Yes. So this project will include the removal of everybody's existing mailbox and fire number. The project will get all new fire numbers that are blue backgrounds with white lettering, and then the swing away mailboxes. So if the plow hits it, it's designed to spin around and not damage the pole. So that's the plan right now. Everybody gets a new mailbox, mailbox post and fire number, and it would be up to the homeowners to put their address and their name on the mailbox as they see fit.
And folks can keep their previous mailbox, David, if they want. But but they have to make those arrangements when the time comes when we make those replacements.
Yes.
So you don't have to take the city one, but that's the plan there. Let's dive a little bit. I have kind of a trio of questions and statements about the water main. What kind of pressure and flow do we need in Hermantown? And what kind of pressure and flow do we have in our jet? Why do we need this loop? Why do we say we need this loop?
So
That's your question, David Wolf.
yeah. I was waiting for Paul to jump in before me. So this is something that, you know, water distribution systems are, the more number of loops in a system and the redundant feeds, it just creates a lot stronger operating water system. So we feel this is a, you know, an appropriate use of the water fund to make this loop. And again, like I said earlier, it also, if there's a water main break in the middle of Lavaque Junction, there's valves that we can isolate it, so the whole road wouldn't be out of water. It would just be from the valve to the break. So that's the benefit that we see from the putting the loop in here.
Perfect. Paul, Sensed, anything to add to that, or is that it?
That's just, I mean, water mains are meant to keep the water moving, and dead ends create troubles, either little or small. And we have the chance to make the connection, make the loop to minimize the dead end, keep the water moving, to, you know, minimize and eliminate settlement, and it's just better overall for the system as a whole.
We've got a question about, do we know which side of the road the trail will be placed, or any trail discussion? And at this point, nothing's been determined about that, and it's not any part of this project. Is that right, Mr. Mulder?
The trail is not included in this project. If at some point in time we look at a future trail in this area, that will be done separately.
Perfect. I think, let me do a quick page through. I've got everybody's questions in the chat that we've dealt with. Let me page through to make sure about that. No, I think we do. You can keep sending the chat in, but if you'd like to unmute yourself and ask a question, we'll I won't ask you to raise your hand, and if it looks like we're going one or two at a time, I'll call on somebody. But if you have further questions, if you want to unmute yourself and ask them, go ahead right now.
Will the city's right-of-way continue to be 33 feet from the center of the old road, so the city will not be getting any more of our frontage than they already have now?
Gotcha. So the question is, David, does the right-of-way change at all at this?
No. So good question. The question is, if we move the road, does the right-of-way move with it? No. The right-of-way stays where it is today. So those the stakes with the orange ribbon is the existing right-of-way, and we're going to work within that, and we're not going to move the right-of-way or ask for any more right-of-way.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome. Amy Van Loon, I think, had a question that was next up. Amy?
Thanks. Mine is regarding those orange flags that mark the right of way and the trees. Would it be possible maybe to have individual trees marked, or is it fair to assume that if our 50 to 60 foot row of 7 pine trees is on that line, should we assume that those will be removed in this project?
Good question. I would like to, if you're okay, I would like to meet with you individually and look at where the road and the ditch is going to end up relative to the trees. And then it's hard for me to answer that without being out in the field looking at things.
So the easy answer is not just as a matter of course. We'll take a look at it and we'll talk to you about that. Fair,
Okay.
David?
Thank
yes.
you.
David, too, for folks, that's a pretty regular question. When is the right time? And I'm throwing this at you in the middle of a pandemic when we can't meet and can't be in City Hall. But for folks who do want to meet with you and talk trees, how should they, when should they, where should they? And is that just an answer that, hey, we'll handle that in the spring when we get closer, or is there something that could be done at this point?
I would offer to meet now before we get the plans finalized and any further. So with, the comfort level of any individual, I'm willing to meet outside and take a tape measure and show people where, the ditch or a driveway or culvert and where the trees, where I think they need to go and where they can stay. And then we can put that information in our plan and have it, the contractor bid it accordingly. So with that, Joe, I would offer, they can give them my work phone or email address to set something up individually.
Perfect. And that information, everybody, is already available on the site dedicated to the roads. So if you go to hermantownmn.com, the city's website, /roads, it'll take you right there. You don't even have to kind of cruise around for the roads information. You'll see my contact information and David's as well. So if you want to shoot either him or I times that work for you or questions specific to your property around trees and distance from the right of way and distance from the center of the road, certainly do that. And I would say definitely take advantage of David's offer sooner than later. Easier for him to measure stuff before we get too much snow piled up. If you could do it on a day like tonight when it's 45 degrees, that'd be even better. Any other questions from residents and members of the public that we can answer today? I'm going to go through, by the way, too, and unmute everybody just to make sure I didn't mute somebody earlier who couldn't, to see if they have a question. So
I got one.
I have another question. A year ago in May 2019, when I first talked to David Wolf, he said to me that if a majority of Lavaque Junction residents did or didn't want something, the city would do its best to accommodate us. And I got that petition that 32 out of 40 residents really, really don't want Lavaque Junction Road widened more than 21 or 22 foot blacktop. Is that something that can be accommodated?
So I'll start by answering on the community engagement side of things. I think David was right on. He did take that into consideration in the parts that he's done in design work and has continued to, but it doesn't necessarily mean that the road will then end up being 21 and 22 feet. We've had a ton of discussions about this, and I'll let David answer. How do we handle the most important parts of this project that we've heard? Safe.
You can't hear, David?
No, he went.
Oh, Joe,
All
you're
right, I
muted.
think I'm back.
Okay.
So David, I don't know where I cut out, but I'll let you take over, David, and I'll answer that.
We definitely took that under advisement. Staff, I guess myself and Public Works Director, feel pretty strongly that we have standards in place for a reason. And those are the roads that they're proven to be safe and they're easy to maintain. We also presented this same presentation to council, and they gave us the head nod to proceed with the 24-foot road. So that's kind of how we landed. And again, it's not that we didn't hear you, but we took all things considered, by lowering the speed limit, by reducing the lane,
Yes.
putting paint markings out there, and shoulder that provides some kind of refuge for pedestrians or bikers or walking your dog or what have you. So we think this is truly the best balance of all the competing factors that we have on this roadway.
Thanks, David.
I see.
I've got a Galaxy S10e, the gentleman in glasses and an orange shirt who's been on the edge waiting for his question. Let's have him jump in.
No big rush. I just had a question. I had Salo put my property corners in. Do I have to worry about those things getting ripped out?
So could you please state your name and your address so we can, Joe, could we have everybody do that so we can?
Yeah,
I think that would be a good idea. So to answer your question, the contractor is supposed to preserve all property markers. In the event that one gets removed, we had one happen in our project over on Alexander, and yes, the city replaced those corners. So if they get taken out, they will be replaced, not at the homeowner's cost.
Question that came in on chat: of other projects you've done, have residents been able to pave their own driveways privately at a reduced cost with the subcontractor? I believe we don't know what folks paid to have their driveways paved this summer on the first project. David and Paul, does that sound right? And is there other cases where folks have negotiated that we know of?
My experience has been that the general contractor that we'll have on board is not set up to pave driveways. Where we've seen a value and savings is where a group of neighbors contract with a paving contractor and they come in and do a half a dozen driveways. So there's a economy of scale there to pave your driveways like that.
I will take advantage of the compliments that we've gotten in the chat, because we don't always hear a lot of that at City Hall, but folks are very happy about the lower speed, the 25-mile-an-hour speeds. Also that the road improvement is long overdue and should look great. A question: will property values, and this is probably for you, John Mulder, will property values and tax bases be raised as a result of the road improvement?
Well, the whole that process will look at the county assessor will have to make that determination of whether or not, what's the increased value of that. That's a possibility, but that's not, they don't go in and say, here's the road, let's increase everybody's value. That's not how they do that. They'll look at those properties individually to see what's the proper assessed value. So not automatically.
Perfect. I've got all the questions answered in the chat. So if anybody in the public would like to toss one out who is out there, go ahead. And again, like David asked, I should ask this at the beginning, please tell us your name and your address when you start. Any further questions on the public side of things?
And Joe, just if people tonight are thinking about it and they get a chance to talk to their significant other, they can always contact City Hall, and we'll, this is not the last time you'd ask questions. We'll have other opportunities, but it's like, hey, oh, I wish I would have thought of that question. Give us a call at City Hall and we'll try to get those answered for you.
And John, you're exactly right. And if that's a question that, we think obviously applies to a couple different properties, that answering question will get posted out on the roads website. Again, hermantownmn.com/roads. If it's something really unique to your property, if you're asking about a particular pine tree or a particular set of trees close to the right of way, we'll get you connected with David to get that answered at the individual level. So that being said, I'll open it one last time for the folks who are here, either in the chat or via the phone or their device. If there's any other questions, please go ahead and ask now. Casey McDonald, it looks like you got one. Again, could you do, Casey, I've got your name because it's listed, but could you do your address for us too?
5236 Lavaque Junction.
Perfect. Fire away.
It was said before for the stakes with the orange flag. It's going to be paved to that flag or the stick.
No,
No.
Is that what I heard earlier?
No,
So David, explain to him the issue of where the stake is the end of the right of way, not the end of the road. Right?
yes. So, yeah, let me explain that again. So there's right-of-way markers on both the north and south side of the road. They are each 33 feet from the center of the platted road. Our new road will be 12 feet of pavement on each side of the center line. So if you take 33 minus 12, 21 feet from that marker with the orange ribbon will be the edge of the paved roadway. That makes sense?
So take your stake, measure 21 feet toward the road. That's where the end of the pavement would be. In those 21 feet, there'll be some shoulder and some ditching.
So where the stick is would be the end of the ditch. Where it's going to be.
The ditch bottom will be 10 feet from there. And then as the ditch bottom goes back up to the yards, that's where we'll tie in, is at that right-of-way stake with the orange ribbon.
Okay.
And if you need further clarification, I'm going to be out there multiple times, and we can just set something up, and I can walk you through what the
I would like that. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
David, is it fair to say that all of the work that we do will be within those stakes?
correct.
Thank
I
you.
mean, there might be one or two exceptions where we have to do something because of driveways, but in all of those cases, if we had to do that, we would talk to those landowners. But our expectation is the work that we do will stay within those stakes.
Correct.
Thank you.
thanks, Casey. Great question. And another quick little blurb from the chat, but David, especially to you, but thanks for all your hard work. And folks, we do have residents who are in favor of the 3-foot increase in pavement because it does increase, they feel it increases the safety for the walkers. And that kind of gets to what David mentioned. We've had a lot of folks talk about width and size, but really what we've heard quite frequently is they want a very safe road, not only for folks with wheels under their feet that are attached to a car, but bikers and walkers and folks pushing strollers. And I know David's worked really hard to get a road that accommodates all of that. And then the added perk, I guess you could say, of the vertical curves keeping us at 25 miles an hour will help combat some of those speed issues. Any final questions? I think Casey McDonald, you got one more?
Yes. I was as a teenager here in the 70s when it was last time it was completely paved, and there better be police on that road in the beginning at least, because it's going to be a drag strip. Telling you that
I have told Chief Crace, park a squad out there when that road gets done.
I
But I'll
guarantee
remind
you,
you,
problems.
I'll remind you that that might be your neighbor or you.
Well, I'm saying it's going to be trouble for walkers,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
just want everybody to be safe. And stuff.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Let me see. I think I've got one. I've got a hand raised by cab 8902. Go ahead, and if you can unmute yourself. I've got you unmuted on our side if you want to ask your question. Otherwise, cab 8902, you'd have to put your question in the chat. Or if it was the occasional inadvertent hand raise, I understand that, but
I thought that person was clapping.
it might have been. We're not used to seeing that again during these meetings.
I don't know, I might be wrong.
I might have overreacted. Any final questions thoughts, concerns, or anything from the public side of things? And we did, John Mulder, you were right. It was a clap. So I guess we're just not used to hearing that. And I can tell you from our side of things, folks, we really do appreciate these. I think for the vast majority of the folks who worked with closely with David, myself, Paul, John, the subcontractors and contractors on the roads we did this summer, it really was a huge project, but ended up being really well communicated, really well handled. So you'll get used to seeing with us. So it's nice to get a clap from you. John, do you want to finish up?
Yeah, I just wanted to say just quickly is thank you for your patience and in being involved in this meeting. It's really hard to do virtual meetings. It's really hard to engage the public when we can't, talk face to face, and we would much rather do that. So we appreciate, your taking the time and figuring out the technology and fighting an internet speed or whatever, and coming in and listening to the presentation and giving us your feedback, and being patient with us, and as we do this. I mean, we're all trying to work on this together, and this time just makes everything so much harder. And so we appreciate the fact that you've participated and that you've done so in such a graceful way. We really do appreciate that.
Thanks, everybody. One final reminder before I'll end this meeting. Again, any information, I do have the recording. I think I'll be able to put this up on our website, but hermantownmn.com/roads. You can get all this information. If you go to our main page and go under departments and communications, which is my page, you'll see road improvement updates. That's where it takes you. And anytime you have questions, concerns, or wondering about something, my email is on that site. David's contact information is on that site. You'll be able to track us down and we'll be able to get you taken care of. Again, like John said, thanks so much for being a part of this project and a part of tonight's meeting. Stay safe, everybody. And again, anytime there's questions, be sure and reach out. Good night, everybody.
Good night.
Night, good job.
Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Yep.